Rep the South Side whenever you pay with your White Sox debit card from Wintrust Community Banks and score perks like free ATMs, no monthly fees, and a $300 opening bonus. Pay with pride every time with Wintrust, Chicago's bank.
Hey everybody, it's Chuck Garfien. Welcome to the White Sox podcast, brought to you as always by our great friends at Wintrust, Chicago's bank. Show your team pride with the White Sox debit card. Get yours at wintrust.com/Sox. Member FDIC, EHL lender. All right, we've got a special podcast for you today. Sherm Lollar is arguably, and let's just say statistically, the greatest catcher in the history of the White Sox franchise, offensively, defensively, together. He played for the Go-Go Sox in the 50s and early 60s, and I get to speak with his son Peter Lawler, who has amazing stories to tell about what his dad was like on the field. What it was like to play baseball back then at old Comiskey Park, and some old school stories that I've never heard before, and neither have you. It's an enlightening conversation about baseball in the 50s and 60s, about this amazing competitor, this amazing person, and a father-son relationship that Peter very much feels to this day. It's next. All right, I'm here with Pete Lawler, and I have so many questions I want to ask you, starting with your dad and your memories of your dad. He was an amazing catcher, all-star catcher. What are your memories of your father?
Well, I was born in 1951. My dad was playing with the Browns. I was born on opening day of 1951, which was April 17th because opening day was later. And I was born at, I think, 1 a.m. And Dad suited up for the game, and they got beat 17-3. But I don't remember that. But he was traded to the White Sox in 1952. And he started bringing me to the ballpark before I can remember. So by the time I was 5 or 6, I was at Comiskey Park in the outfield shagging flies. I remember the first fly ball I caught in batting practice was Luis Aparicio, because every time he would take batting practice, the last swing he would hit it down the right field line, so I would go over there and play and
just wait for it.
Yeah, wait for it. And so I caught one, and that was, and I had the first glove I had was a 𝗭𝗏𝗏 glove, because 𝗭𝗏𝗏 had a really small glove. He really believed second basemen needed small gloves, and he transferred that knowledge to Joe Morgan, and he was Joe Morgan's coach with the Astros, and so Morgan also had, so it was a little small glove that was small enough for a 6-year-old to wear. And then in, I don't know, 59 or 60, Luis Aparicio asked me to play catch, and I'd left my glove in the locker, so he asked if I wanted to use his glove, which I did, and he asked me if I liked it, and I said, yeah. He said, well, it's yours. So that was my major glove as a kid growing up.
You still have it?
No.
Oh, no.
And I don't have the Fox glove either. I think my mom may have tossed them out when I went to college, but it's a tragedy.
Well, tragedy, but look at the childhood you have. It's a treasure, all those memories.
Yeah.
And being at old Comiskey Park, what was it like just coming to this park and being on the field, in the clubhouse with these greats?
So the parking lot was over behind left field, and you came in a gate, and then you went up a ramp, and then walked in the clubhouse. I can still see where different lockers were. Dad's locker was right next to 𝗭𝗏𝗏's. Early Wins was right across. Billy Pierce was down the hall. Luis Aparicio was down. I can remember where all those lockers were. But the other interesting thing was, I think that locker room had been the same locker room that was there when the White Sox threw the World Series in 1919. The floors were wood, but it was almost like sawdust because they were so chewed up. It was really antiquated. The showers were real rusty. And then the coaches' part was back in the back because the coaches didn't really fraternize with the players. I can remember the training room. the trainer was named Doc Froelich. He wasn't a doctor, but and I can remember Dad going back there and sitting on the training table, and about every 2 weeks, because they didn't wear batting gloves back then, they would have to shave the calluses off their hands. So I remember him sitting there with Doc Froelich, you know, working on his hands. Yeah, I have a lot of memories of, and then you would walk down a long tunnel to get to the field, and you know, you're driving through South Side Chicago, and it's all concrete and steel, and then as you come up the ramp, and the dugout was a dugout, and then you come up at eye level, and then there's this green major league field, which was
stood out.
Yeah.
It was like electric, I'm sure. So colorful. It's like watching a color TV, and
yeah,
it wasn't color TV back then.
Exactly. Yeah.
So your dad played for the White Sox from 1952 to 1963. They had a winning record every year, and there's this history with the White Sox that is told that they rarely made the playoffs, but there were so many years where they would win 90, 95 games where they'd finish second usually to the Yankees, and they never would even make the playoffs because of that, because only one team got in. But this was a great team. This was I want to call it a dynasty because they didn't win any World Series, but there was something special about that team, right?
Yeah. I think as a kid, I could sense the camaraderie. Those guys, I think they really got along well together. Like in the midsummer, they had an off day where they would go to Romeo Beach, which was somewhere in Joliet, and the whole team would, like, you know, go on a picnic together. So I think that was part of it. They had really good pitching and really good defense. Aparicio and Fox were Gold Glovers. The first Gold Glove was given in 1957, and it was only given for one position in the major leagues, and Dad got it as catcher, and I don't know if Fox and Aparicio got that year, but I know they were Gold Glove winners, and Jim Landis in center field became a Gold Glove winner. So they were strong up the middle defensively, and they had really good pitching. Billy Pierce was the ace of the staff in the mid-50s, and then early Wynn was traded from the Indians to the White Sox, which was devastating for me because Minnie Minoso was my buddy out in the outfield, and they traded him to the Indians. I was devastated by that.
He was your buddy in what way?
He was just, my mother would tell you that the first 20 words that I learned was Mini Momo. He was just really good around kids. Just a really nice guy. And when they traded him to the Indians, it was a tragedy for me. But then he got traded back to the White Sox in 1960, which was good. But early Wynn, he was a Cy Young Award winner at something like age 38 or 39 and 59. They had great relief pitching. Back in the days when relief pitchers, there was usually just one guy would come in and finish. Jerry Staley and Turk Lown were really good relievers. They had formerly been good starting pitchers, and Bob Shaw had a great year in '59. So I remember I was at most of the games, home games in '59 after school was out. I was usually there, so I remember all that.
So when your dad retired, he had the best fielding percentage of anybody at the catcher position in Major League history. Did he ever talk to you about defending his position?
He didn't. And he was a man of a few words. So he didn't have a lot to say about, and he didn't, he was really unassuming. So, you know, he'd bring the Gold Glove home, and we had a bowling alley. He would put it on display in the bowling alley, but he never really talked much about being a catcher. And I know when I was in high school, I was a catcher, and I asked him once about footwork throwing down the second. He said, I just got up and got up there as quick as I could. I think maybe back then things weren't as analytical as they were now. I know from reading old newspaper articles that Paul Richards was the manager in the early 50s, and he was a former Major League catcher, and he worked a lot with Dad on his throwing, and I think really made Dad the Gold Glover that he became. When he came up, he came up with the Indians and was traded to the Yankees, and in 1947, he competed with 𝗬𝗍𝗶𝗹 Berra for the catching position, and both of them were considered defensive liabilities. Really,
I read that too.
They'd had really good offensive numbers in the minor leagues, and both of them became excellent, defensive catchers as they matured.
Do you feel like your dad was kind of in the shadow of 𝗬𝗍𝗶𝗹 Berra? Because there was 𝗬𝗍𝗶𝗹 Berra, #1 catcher, Yankee, great offensive player, World Series champion, and your dad was like right under him, but this didn't get the respect he deserved.
Yeah, that's true. There was a article in Look magazine, which was at the time was a major, national publication, and it was, the title of the article was "Is Lawler Better Than Berra?" And it was written in, I think, maybe 1959. Berra's skills eroded before Dad's did. So at the end, in the late 50s, Dad was a better defensive catcher, certainly, than Berra. And Dad had a famous quote, because he had a lot of admiration for Berra. And one of the questions was, well, you're playing in Comiskey Park, which is one of the toughest parks to hit in, and then 𝗬𝗍𝗶𝗹 Berra's playing in Yankee Stadium, where it's 296 down the right field line. And Dad said, 𝗬𝗍 could out-hit me if I were playing in a phone booth. And, Dad was a very good major league hitter, but I mean...
Very humble.
Yeah. But I still have that article, and that's what he said. So they were, like before games, 𝗬𝗍𝗶 would come up and, talk to Dad. Dad had a lot of respect for Berra. Berra was just a really great player. And there was never any, rivalry or anything. And I think Dad would not start all-star games. He never started a single all-star game because it was 𝗬𝗍𝗶 Berra.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in 1959, such an amazing year for the White Sox. They win the American League pennant. They go to the World Series. My dad was there with his dad, my grandfather. What are your memories of the World Series?
So,
59?
We would go to spring training with Dad, and then when spring training camp broke, we would go back and go to school in Springfield, Missouri, where we lived, and then we would usually rent a house in Chicago during the season. And in 1959, we rented a house in Hinsdale. But then on September 1, when school would start, we would head back. But because the White Sox were probably going to win the pennant, we stayed in Hinsdale, and I went to school in Hinsdale during September of 1959. So I was there for games 1 and 2 of the World Series, which were at Comiskey Park. I vividly remember Kluszewski hitting 2 home runs in game 1. I don't remember being there for game 6, when they came back. I just don't remember that game.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just a traumatic experience that I erased from my memory because the White Sox got beat badly, and that was the end of that was it. And the other thing I remember is that if you hit a home run in the World Series, you got a car. And the car was a Ford Falcon, which was probably the worst car that was ever made. I mean, you could ding the side of it and it sounded like a hollow trash can. But Dad got a Ford Falcon, and that was like the family car for probably till the late 60s.
Went a long way, that Ford Falcon.
Yeah.
He was known for many reasons, but he was a part of a base running mistake, if you want to call it that, really more by the third base coach in that World Series. He was thrown out at home. Did he ever talk about that?
No.
No, he did not talk about this. But everyone else did.
You're not supposed to make the first out at third base. He made the first out at home plate, and it wasn't even, and you can look at the video on YouTube now. I remember reading an article a while back where there's a whole history of World Series GOATs, and I'm not talking about greatest of all time. Mickey Owens dropped third strike. Hank Gowdy stepped on his mask, and Dad is right up there for being a GOAT in the World Series. But you're right. Tony Cuccinello, the third base coach, took full credit for that.
Yeah, I think he got most of the blame, but I think as time has gone on, they don't remember the third base coach. It's the guy who's out at home plate, right?
Yeah. And it wasn't even close. I mean, he didn't even slide.
I wanted to show something that actually I have in my bag here. I got to go just get up for a second because your dad, when he wanted to raise, he didn't have an agent at the time, did he?
My mom was his...
Your mom was his agent?
Yeah.
I've got in my possession here, I think thanks to you, by the way. It's not like I unearthed this. This is a letter that your dad sent to Charles Comiskey in 1959, January of 59, and in 58, keep in mind your dad had career highs in home runs and RBIs, led the team, and played 127 games because he's a catcher. And he asked for a raise. You know all about this, obviously. I like that it's addressed to Charles Comiskey. It just says Comiskey Park. There's no address. You can just say Comiskey Park. But it says, as in most cases, records and averages don't show the type of year I had for you and Al Lopez in 1958. He was the manager. I didn't come close to leading the league in anything, and I didn't even drive in 100 runs, but I was the everyday catcher on our low-scoring team where mistakes, both mechanical and mental, have to be kept at an absolute minimum. I hit fourth for our second-place ball club, drove in the big run all season long. I believe you will agree that I was about the best ball player you had in 58. This is a humble person who's now coming out and showing what he really thinks on the inside. So he goes, so weighing my value to the White Sox as a player against our decline in attendance in 58, I'm asking for a salary of $32,500 for the 1959 season. I'm hoping to hear from you favorably concerning this matter soon. And looking forward to another good year personally and also to seeing more people in Comiskey Park next season. Do you know if he got the raise?
I don't.
You don't?
Yeah.
But just to think, and I was thinking about this today, that I was in the White Sox clubhouse, and it would be a great reminder. I would almost, I mean, if I had the ability to do this, and I would never do it, but if I had the ability to do it, I would put this letter on the seat of every Major League Baseball player today in their locker and say, this is what these guys, you think you have it not bad now, but you're not happy with the money you're making. He was begging the owner for $32,000 a year, and he was the best player on the team. What does that say about who he was and what the game was back then?
I think it says a lot about the reserve clause. As you may know, Major League players only get paid during the regular season. They don't get paid in spring training. And so if you got a contract in January, and I have the contract that they sent him, then if you decided you didn't want to play, you could hold out. But you're making a house payment, you've got a wife and kids.
They had all the leverage.
Yeah, they had a lot of leverage. And so I think that was one thing. But I also think there was not as much money in baseball.
Yeah.
They didn't draw as well, even though people like to look at the 50s as the golden era. I think the marketing of Major League Baseball is a lot different. Bill Veeck was a pioneer. That scoreboard you look at out there was, I think, the original gimmick in a baseball park, and it's still there. It's the same scoreboard that was in old Comiskey Park. Is that correct?
I don't think it's the same
I think it is.
Is it really?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
I think it is.
Okay.
But in Major League games back then, between innings, it was quiet. You could hear the pitcher's ball hitting the catcher's mitt. Now it's like a video game out there. There's all kinds of stuff to bring people into the park. So the White Sox didn't draw nearly as well, even as they do now, even though they were a first division team. So that was part of it. But the other part was the reserve clause, which had been in effect since the 1900s, and it really. Players tried to jump to form a Mexican league in 1940s, and those guys were banned. They were blackballed trying to come back in. So there was a lot of leverage against players trying to negotiate for higher salaries back then.
Do you feel like your dad should be in the Hall of Fame?
He would say no, but he probably would also say there are probably a lot of guys in the Hall of Fame that aren't in the Hall of Fame that are in the Hall of Fame that shouldn't be there. He really. Most of the Major League players, to him, were guys at work, and they're playing at a very high level. But he placed other players on a higher pedestal, like Williams and DiMaggio and Mantle, that were at a level higher than the average all-star player. So, but I was around him once when a couple of times when people would say you should be in the Hall of Fame, and he said no, I don't think I should.
You look back at it now. I mean, he had a higher on-base percentage than Yogi Berra. But he was more of a defensive catcher, and nowadays I think that is appreciated more. But I also see why I can see why the voters of today couldn't go all the way down there into the past and say yes, Sherm Lawler needs to be in the Hall of Fame. But he is one of the best White Sox catchers of all time, maybe the best. What do you think?
I think there's no question he was the best catcher of all time. Defensively, I know that Carlton Fisk had really great offensive years here, and Fisk was a very good catcher, but I don't think there's any question that Dad was the best defensive catcher, and he was a very good major league hitter. He hit cleanup for a first division team. So, I mean, the record speaks for itself. He didn't give out the Gold Gloves until '57, and he won his last one at age 35 when his skills were starting to deteriorate.
He won the first 3, didn't he?
Yeah. And by the way, the backup catcher for the White Sox, there were 2 of them in '59, Johnny Romano and Earl Batty, both of whom were really nice guys. Earl Batty was traded to the Washington Senators in 1960. He was kind of Dad's protege. He won the Gold Glove in 1960. He's the one that ultimately stopped Dad's run.
I've got another letter that was sent. This is January 19th, 1963, from your old address in Springfield, Missouri, to Ed Short. Who was Ed Short?
He was the general manager.
He was the general manager of the White Sox. And it says, I wonder how much I want to read of this. It's very great. It says, I received the contracts for the 1963 season yesterday, and I'm returning them unsigned. He was not happy with the $3,000 reduction in salary. But then he added, however, I still am not satisfied with my performance in the 84 games that I did make. This was near the end of his career. And I'm willing to have my 1963 salary reduced to $30,000. It took me a long time to reach my present salary level, several seasons of catching 125 to 140 baseball games for $7,500 to $15,000 a year. I think it would only be fair that the downward trend should be at a slower rate. And he said sincerely, puts his name on there, and he says, P.S. And another thing, you shouldn't ask a guy to catch that Hoyt Wilhelm, for less than 30 grand.
Yeah, that was Dad's sense of humor. Yeah.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know, Hoyt Wilhelm was a knuckleball pitcher and was notoriously difficult to catch because you had no idea where the ball was going to go. And he was a White Sox pitcher, a Hall of Famer. Those 82 games, what he didn't mention was that he was hit by a pitch and it fractured his right thumb in 1962, and he missed 6 weeks because of that. And when he came back, they had a special bat for him in which there was a cylinder, a plastic cylinder that fit around the bat that would slide around so he could hit. So I think it would be very... And we had that bat around my house forever because he would just keep odd things as kind of memorabilia. Unfortunately, he didn't keep a lot of stuff. Like at the end of the year, I think he would probably just toss his gloves, catcher's equipment out. But that bat. So trying to hit with this weird bat, and I think he hit 280 that year. But his power numbers went down later in his career.
What kind of mementos do you have of your father's career? What kind of souvenirs, mementos?
Well, in 1960, he built a bowling alley, and it had a cocktail lounge called the 11th Frame. And behind the bar was a big picture of Dad from that Look magazine article, really nice picture. But then there were also baseball bats all behind the bar, which he would go around before batting practice and say, hey, Mickey, I'm building a bowling alley. Can I have a bat? So after Dad passed away, my mom was the president of the alley until like 1990. But then when she sold it, we have all those bats at my house, and they're all dark brown because of the tobacco stains. Everybody smoked in bowling alleys in general, and cocktail lounges and bowling alleys in particular. But, you know, Ted Williams, Mickey Mantle, Stan Musial, Yogi Berra, Luis Aparicio, Nellie Fox, Jungle Jim Rivera,
all the greats.
Yeah, yeah. And they still have their bat, a lot of them still have their, you know, the bat marks on where the baseball hit the bat and everything, if you look really closely. I have, in 1959, when they won the World Series, Dad wanted to have when they won the pennant, I'm sorry,
yes.
He wanted to have a gold glove made out of the glove that he wore all year. And he thought, gold gloves are still leather, but they're kind of like, they're gold, but you know, they're still leather. And he thought, you know, he took it to a guy and said, you know, I want you to make a gold glove out of this. What the guy did was bronzed it, so it weighs about 12 pounds. And on the edge it says Sherm Lollar American League Champions 1959. And we used that as a doorstop at our house when I was a kid growing up. But I have it at my house.
Yeah.
I have the 58 and 59 gold gloves. Tom Pagnozzi from the Cardinals, who won 3 gold gloves, is a friend of the family. He lives in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where my dad grew up. He's a memorabilia collector. He's got the 57 gold glove on loan from us, so have that. Also in the bowling alley, there were just a lot of signed baseballs, which they're just dark brown. You can just barely read them. But I also have, one thing he did keep were the all-star baseballs. And the guys on the all-star team everybody on the team would sign a ball. And I got a lot of those from both the American League and National League. And I had to go back and kind of look to see who was an all-star then, and I figured out, you know, what years they were, because they were just lying around the house. They weren't really on a display or anything.
Lying around the house, probably signatures from Ted Williams, Mickey Mantle, etc.
Joe DiMaggio, yeah, definitely.
Amazing.
I have one of the interesting things about catching is the way the catcher's mitt evolved during Dad's career. I have a glove from 1951 when he was with the Browns, which he kept because he had a rash on the back of his hand, and Rawlings made a special glove that was a canvas back. This glove, there's no way you can catch a baseball with one hand. And I have a glove from 54, and then the 59 gloves, they're all gloves where the catchers had to catch with 2 hands. And it was in the 60s that the glove evolved to the point, so Johnny Bench is credited with, you know, being able to frame the ball and all that, but it was not possible, I think, until the catcher's mitt evolved to the point where you could catch the ball with 2 hands. So when you see pictures of any catcher that era, and Dad in particular, you know, and they would hold their hand like that to try to protect them from foul tips, but, you know, Dad's fingernails had long chips and splinters in them from foul tips that he had picked up over the years.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough physical position. I can't imagine back then what he had to deal with to get through a game, let alone a season.
Yeah, I think.
Like how beat up was his body at the end of a season?
I don't remember, but I do remember that in the spring training, after he would work out a lot in the winter, but they didn't have anything like they did now. So like one year he built a log cabin and chopped wood all year.
That was his working out?
Yeah. But my mom told me that during spring training he would be so sore that when he would come home, and we would rent a place on the beach at Indian Rocks Beach when the White Sox trained in Tampa, or Siesta Key when they trained in Sarasota, and she would send him out and just make him swim, you know, to try to get rid of the soreness. The other thing I remember is a lot of games back then were day games, and when I was real young, I got to go to the day games, and he would give me I'd be like 6 years old, and he would just give me a quarter and just turn me loose in Comiskey Park. But night games,
Well, what'd you do with a quarter?
ice cream, you know. I had my special place. It was actually across from Comiskey Park. They would let me out to go get it. Yeah, I remember that. But
wait, I want to go back a second. I want to hear about the night game. So how old were you when you were just loose at Comiskey Park?
probably 6 or
6 years old,
Yeah.
just whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think parents back then weren't as
Strict?
I saw a lot of fights and stuff, you know, especially toward the end of the game when maybe, you know, people had too much to drink. I saw a policeman who used to hang out in the clubhouse a lot, get in a big fight, you know. Yeah, so I have a lot of memories of that. But after night games, my brother and I would want to go wake Dad up, and you know, Mom would want him sleeping in. But I can remember, like, you know, he would wear short pajamas, and he always had a bruise about on one side of the leg or the other of a foul tip that would come in and get him.
That was a warrior type job for sure. What he had to go through. I had a few more questions. One is he retired in I think '63. Was that his last year?
Yeah.
63.
He was released.
He was released.
My mom told me this story. He never said anything about it, but he came into the clubhouse in late September of '63, and there was a letter on his the bench in front of his locker, and it said, and I've seen the letter. It said, "Dear Sherman, you are hereby given your unconditional release." They didn't even call him into the office, and
After all he did for the team.
Man, he never said anything about it. My mom wasn't happy about that.
Yeah. And he just kept that inside? At least he didn't verbalize it to you.
He would say that he said it. He was a man of few words, but he said on a couple of occasions that he was happy to have been able to earn a living doing what he had wanted to do growing up. So it was not a bitter guy.
What's it been like to be his son?
He was a great father, very gentle person. I was at dinner a while back, and there was a guy that was a big baseball buff, and he asked me if you know, there was any pressure on me, and certainly not from Dad. He would come to all in the off season, like if I was playing a sport, my brother, he would come to all the games, and he never was critical other than don't throw your bat after you strike out. That's Bush League. But he would never, he was to the point of not even giving any advice at all. I asked my brother, who was a really good baseball player, I said, did Dad ever talk to you about hitting? And he said, after my brother had some power, and Dad said, home runs are accidents. When my brother was trying, you know, to yank that. And the other thing he told him, he said, your first move is back as a hitter, you know, going back. But there weren't a lot of analytics, and Ted Williams wrote a book called The Science of Hitting after he retired, and Williams was the type of guy that would really think about what he was doing. But I think a lot of hitters, they didn't really think a lot about you know, where their hands were. If they did, they didn't talk to 10-year-olds about it. I remember my dad saying one thing, just volunteering it on the way back from a game. He said, there are two things that are changing the game of baseball, night baseball and the slider. And I said, why? And he said, it's because you can't see the spin. I think the night baseball thing has gone away, because if you look at old pictures in the 50s, those guys are playing in the dark. The lights, I'd like to know how many candle lights there lumens are on the field, but if you look at those old pictures, the lights were not good. Now I think they're a lot better.
Yeah.
But the slider was a pitch that really came on in the 50s. I know that I remember another Earl Torgerson, who played with Dad, told me once that Dick Donovan credited Dad for really making him a major league pitcher, and Donovan was up and down in the minor leagues, and his slider is, I think, what made him a major league pitcher. He was able to throw the slider. A lot of guys like Jim Bunning and really started throwing sliders. But I think when Dad came up in the 40s, it was, you know, the curveball, but not the slider. So,
Yeah. So when you come to Chicago, I mean, your dad passed away in 1977. Do you feel a connection to him even more so when you come back to Chicago and you're here, at least near where the old Comiskey Park used to be?
Yeah, I do. There's a marble home plate. I don't know if you've seen it, which says something like home plate for Comiskey Park, 1910 to 1991. I want to see that today because that was his office for 12 years. So I feel that. I feel him there.
Yeah. And when I just found this out from you, that when this park, this new park, it's not new anymore, but when it was built in 1991, who threw out the first pitch? Your mother.
My mother did, yeah. To Carlton Fisk, yeah.
What was that like for her to experience that, and for you guys as a family to see that?
I think it was a big thrill for all of us, but to be remembered, I think was really special for her. Early win, Gus is what they called him. He was an announcer for the Sox then, so he was there on the field when she threw it out. She did not have a good arm. I think she got it up there. I think it rolled up there, but yeah.
Yeah. And you're wearing a 1959 hat. I know it's not from 59, but your decision to wear that when you come here, is that kind of like some symbolic gesture on your part?
And one of my sons, and then there's one of my other sons has a T-shirt that come here, Ryan. We're almost sure that this is Dad. But
you're not sure if it is. It looks like him.
It's got to be him.
Yeah.
But
It's from the cover of the program in 1962.
Oh, so it's the cover of the program from '62.
From the press guide. Yeah, it's got to be him. I mean, but it doesn't say that.
It doesn't say that.
Yeah.
And then you are here because, well, you want to see the park and just come to Chicago, but there's a special bobblehead day.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Luis Aparicio bobblehead day. He's the only surviving member of the White Sox that played in the '59 series. He's also the oldest surviving member of the Baseball Hall of Fame. I can remember when he first came up was within a year of me going to the park. He was an absolute sensation in Chicago, not only because of his base stealing, and he's credited for really bringing the stolen base back to baseball. In the early 50s, if you stole 25 bases, I mean, you led the league, and in '59 he stole, I think, something like 56. But the other thing was his defense. He would just draw gas from the crowd because his arm strength was so good and his range was so good. His English, when he first came up, wasn't great, and then it got better. Mm-hmm. After Dad retired, he became a coach for the Orioles, and Aparicio was traded to the Orioles. I think either the same year. I know the first year that Dad was a coach with the Orioles, Aparicio was with the Orioles, so I was around him for another 3 years after that. Just a really, really nice person. So when they said there was going to be Luis Aparicio bobblehead night, I signed up, and they all signed up.
And here you are.
Yeah.
Hey, this has been great talking with you. Learning about your dad. My dad would talk about your dad. That '59 team was like the peak of his childhood. He was 15 at the time. And so I feel a connection to my dad just talking to you about your dad.
Yeah.
So it's been great to talk to you and learn a lot about you and your dad, and a great era for White Sox baseball. The Go-Go White Sox, right?
Yeah.
All right. Pete Lawler here on the White Sox podcast. Thank you so much.
All right.
𝗏𝗏 𝗟𝗶𝘀, take it away.
All right, Art Chuck, this edition of the White Sox podcast is over.